Nurse agreed to pretend being his wife for one night. The billionaire said, "Stay longer." Hello everyone, and welcome back to Romance Rewind Stories. Before we dive into today's incredible story, I have a small favor to ask. If you're enjoying these heartwarming tales, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. It's quick, it's free, and it's the best way to support us in bringing you more emotional romance stories. And here's something I'd love to know. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I always enjoy seeing our amazing community from around the world. Oh, and if this story touches your heart, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps us grow and reach more people who love these kinds of tales. Now, let's get into today's story. Nurse agreed to pretend being his wife for one night. The billionaire said, "Stay longer." The hospital cafeteria at 2 in the morning was a desolate place. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The smell of reheated coffee hung in the air like a tired ghost, mixing with the faint scent of disinfectant that seemed to permeate every corner of St. Catherine's Medical Center. Sloane Mercer sat alone at a corner table, still in her scrubs, eating a sandwich that tasted like cardboard and regret. At 26, Sloane had become an expert at surviving on 4 hours of sleep and vending machine meals. Her shift had started at noon yesterday, and it was now pushing 14 hours with no end in sight. 2 nurses had called in sick, leaving the overnight skeleton crew even more skeletal than usual. Her feet ached, her back screamed, and somewhere around hour 10, she'd stopped feeling her toes entirely. But she couldn't complain. Nursing didn't pay what people thought it did, especially when you were still drowning in student loan debt and sending money home every month to help your younger brother finish his engineering degree. Their parents had died 3 years ago in a house fire, and Sloane had become both sister and guardian overnight. She'd promised her mother, in those final moments in the hospital, that she'd make sure Marcus graduated. That promise kept her going through the worst shifts. She was halfway through her terrible sandwich when a shadow fell across her table. "Excuse me, are you Sloane Mercer?" Sloane looked up to find a man in an expensive suit standing beside her table. Even exhausted as she was, she registered that he was striking, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that looked professionally styled even at this ungodly hour, and piercing blue eyes that held a desperate intensity. His suit was custom-tailored, the kind that cost more than her monthly rent. But despite his polished appearance, he looked utterly wrecked. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his tie was loosened, and his normally steady hands trembled slightly. "Yes?" Sloane said cautiously, her nursing instincts immediately on alert. "Can I help you? Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" "No, nothing like that." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. The gesture dislodged whatever product had been keeping it in place, and suddenly he looked younger, more vulnerable. "I know this is going to sound completely insane, but I need your help, desperately." Sloane set down her sandwich slowly. In 14 hours of emergency nursing, she'd heard a lot of desperate pleas, but something about this man's tone made her uneasy. "I'm listening." "My mother is upstairs," he said, the words rushing out. "4th floor, room 412. She's dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. They're saying it's a matter of days now, maybe hours." Sloane's expression softened immediately. She'd lost count of how many families she'd supported through those final moments. "I'm so sorry. That's incredibly difficult. But if you need a nurse, you should speak to whoever's assigned to her care." "It's not that," he interrupted, then seemed to catch himself. "Sorry, I'm not explaining this well. I'm Dashiell Grayson, by the way." He extended his hand, and Sloane shook it automatically. His grip was firm but not aggressive, the hands of someone used to closing business deals. "My mother, she's been asking about my wife. A wife that doesn't exist. She's convinced I'm married to someone named Sloane, and she keeps saying she needs to meet you before she..." His voice cracked, revealing the raw pain beneath his composed exterior. Before she dies. Sloane stared at him, confusion written across her tired face. I don't understand. Why would she think you're married to someone with my name? Dashiell sank into the chair across from her without asking permission, as if his legs could no longer hold him up. Because I'm an idiot who made a terrible decision 6 months ago. When she was first diagnosed, she was devastated, not about dying. She'd made peace with that. But she kept crying about how I'd be alone, how I'd built this massive company but sacrificed everything else. No wife, no kids, no real friends, just work and more work. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos with shaking fingers. She was so sad and I couldn't stand it. So I lied. I told her I'd met someone at a hospital charity gala, that I was engaged. I needed a photo, so I went through the event pictures and found this one. He turned the phone to show Sloane. It was from the St. Catherine's annual fundraiser 8 months ago, an event where Sloane had volunteered, serving drinks and chatting with donors between her shifts. In the background of a photo featuring the hospital's board of directors, you could see her clearly, laughing at something someone had said, looking genuinely happy. I told her that was my fiancée Sloane, Dashiell continued, his voice thick with shame, that we'd met at that event, that you were a nurse. I picked that because I'd heard her say so many times how much she respected nurses, how they were the real heroes of medicine. I made up this whole story about how you kept me grounded, how you made me laugh, how you saw me as a person instead of just a CEO. You built an entire fake relationship around a stranger in a photo? Sloane's voice rose slightly, drawing a few looks from the cafeteria's other exhausted occupants. I know how it sounds, Dashiell said miserably. I know it was wrong and stupid and desperate, but you didn't see her face when I told her. For the first time since the diagnosis, she smiled. Really smiled. She said she could die happy knowing I wouldn't be alone. And I thought it would just be a small lie, something to bring her comfort. But you kept lying, Sloane said, not quite able to keep the judgment from her voice. Every visit, she'd ask about you, how you were doing, what we'd done that weekend when the wedding was. And every time, I'd make up more details because I couldn't bear to take away her happiness. He looked at Sloane with eyes that held genuine anguish. I know it was selfish. I know I created this mess. But now she's in her final days, and all she wants, the only thing she wants, is to meet the woman who made her son happy. Sloane sat back in her chair, her sandwich forgotten. This was, without question, the strangest request she'd ever received. And her instinct was to refuse, to tell this wealthy man that he'd made his bed and now had to lie in it. But she'd spent 3 years watching people die. She'd held hands in final moments, listened to deathbed confessions, witnessed the desperate need for closure that came at the end. She knew what it meant to dying patients when they could resolve their final worries, and she knew what it meant to the families left behind. You want me to pretend to be your wife, she said slowly, needing to hear herself say it out loud to believe this was actually happening. Just for tonight, Dashiell said quickly, leaning forward with desperate hope in his eyes. Just for an hour, maybe 2. Let her meet you, see that I'm happy and settled, let her have that peace, and then you can leave, and I swear I'll never bother you again. I'll pay you whatever you want. I have money, plenty of it. Stop, Sloane interrupted, holding up a hand. I don't want your money. The words surprised her even as she said them. If I do this, and that's a huge if, I'm doing it for your mother, not for you, not for payment, because no one should die with unresolved worries if there's something that can be done about it. Relief crashed across Dashiell's features like a wave. Thank you. God, thank you so much. I know it's insane. It's completely insane, Sloane agreed firmly. And I need you to understand something. I've seen what happens when families lie to dying patients. Sometimes it brings peace. Sometimes it causes more pain. If we do this, we do it right. No half measures. Your mother deserves better than a rushed performance. Absolutely, Dashiell agreed quickly. Whatever you need. Just tell me. Sloane checked her watch. Her break ended in 15 minutes. Tell me about her. Not the fake story you created, but the real woman. What does she love? What makes her laugh? What does she believe about this fictional relationship? For the next 20 minutes, they sat in that depressing cafeteria while Dashiell painted a picture of Eleanor Grayson. She loved classic films, especially anything with Katharine Hepburn. She'd been a literature professor before retiring. She believed in kindness above all else, had volunteered at homeless shelters for 40 years. She'd raised Dashiell alone after his father died when he was 12, working 2 jobs to put him through school. "She's the best person I know," Dashiell said, his voice breaking. "She taught me that success means nothing if you're not kind. And then I spent 20 years building an empire and forgetting everything she taught me. She deserves better than the son I became." "And the fake relationship?" Sloane prompted gently. "What does she think she knows?" Dashiell pulled out his phone again, showing her notes he'd apparently been keeping, a detailed fiction he'd built over months. They'd met at that hospital fundraiser 18 months ago. Sloane had spilled wine on his suit. They'd laughed about it and he'd asked for her number. They'd dated for a year before he proposed, a simple proposal during a walk in Central Park because Sloane didn't like grand gestures. They were planning a small wedding for next spring, something intimate, because Sloane's parents had passed away and she didn't want a big event without them there. "You made me sound like a better person than I am," Dashiell admitted quietly. "The man my mother thinks I am when I'm with you, that's who I wish I actually was. Someone who leaves the office at reasonable hours, who volunteers at community events, who notices when people need help. You apparently brought out the best in me." "That's a lot of pressure for a fake wife," Sloane said, but there was a gentleness in her tone now. She could see how much he loved his mother, how desperately he wanted to give her peace. "I'll do it, but we need ground rules." They spent another 10 minutes establishing boundaries. Sloane would stay for 1 hour, maybe 2 if needed. They'd be affectionate, but not overly so. Comfortable couple, not newlyweds. If Eleanor asked about the wedding, they'd keep it vague. And most importantly, Dashiell would handle any medical questions because Sloane refused to interfere with another nurse's patient care. "One more thing," Sloane said as they stood to leave. "I need to change. I can't meet her in scrubs covered in coffee stains. Give me 15 minutes. She ducked into the staff locker room and changed into the spare clothes she kept for after shifts. Simple jeans and a soft blue sweater her brother had given her last Christmas. She let her hair down from its messy bun, finger-combed it into something presentable, and applied minimal makeup to hide the exhaustion. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. "You're about to lie to a dying woman," she told her reflection, "for a complete stranger. This better be worth it." When she met Dashiell in the hallway, his expression shifted. "You look beautiful," he said, then seemed to catch himself. "Sorry, that was..." "It's fine," Sloane interrupted. "If I'm your wife, you should probably be able to compliment me without apologizing." They took the elevator to the 4th floor in heavy silence. Sloane's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd done a lot of difficult things in her nursing career, held dying patients' hands, delivered terrible news to families, performed CPR knowing it was futile. But this felt different, more personal somehow. "Before we go in," Dashiell said, stopping outside room 412, "I need you to know something. My mother is sharp. Even now, even dying, she's the smartest person I've ever met. If we're not convincing, she'll know." "Then we'd better be convincing," Sloane said, and before she could lose her nerve, she took his hand. It was warm, slightly calloused, despite his wealth. The hands of someone who'd worked his way up, not inherited everything. "Let's give your mother the peace she deserves." Dashiell squeezed her hand gratefully, and then he opened the door. The private room was nicer than most. Large windows overlooking the city, comfortable chairs, soft lighting that didn't scream hospital. And in the bed, propped up on pillows, was Eleanor Grayson. She was small and frail, her body consumed by the cancer that had ravaged her for months. Her skin was paper-thin, almost translucent, and an oxygen cannula rested beneath her nose. But her eyes, those were alert and bright, the same piercing blue as her son's. When she saw Dashiell, her face lit up with pure love, and when she saw Sloane, tears immediately filled her eyes. "Oh," Eleanor breathed, her voice weak but clear. "Oh, you're even more beautiful than the photos. Come here, darling. Please, let me look at you." Sloane moved to the bedside, and Eleanor reached out with a trembling hand. Sloane took it gently, mindful of the IV line and the bruising from repeated needle sticks. "Hello, Mrs. Grayson," Sloane said softly. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you." "Call me Eleanor, please," the older woman insisted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're going to be my daughter. I've been waiting so long to meet you. Dash has told me so much, but seeing you here, in person..." She squeezed Sloane's hand with surprising strength. "Thank you for loving my boy. Thank you for making him happy. I can die knowing he won't be alone." Sloane felt her own throat tighten with emotion. This was so wrong. This woman was dying, believing a beautiful lie, but looking at the peace on Eleanor's face, the joy in her eyes, Sloane couldn't bring herself to shatter that illusion. "He makes me happy too," Sloane said, the words feeling both false and somehow true. "He's told me so much about you, about how you raised him, how you taught him kindness. I can see where he gets his good heart." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "He pretends to be all business, but underneath, he's soft. Takes after his father that way. Both of them lions in the boardroom, kittens at home." She looked between them, and Sloane realized Dashiell had moved to stand beside her, his hand finding hers again naturally. "Sit, both of you. I want to hear everything. Tell me about the proposal. Dash said it was romantic, but he's terrible at details. He called it nice. What kind of proposal is just nice?" Sloane looked at Dashiell in panic. They hadn't prepared for this level of questioning. But Dashiell squeezed her hand and launched into the story. "It was in Central Park," he said, and Sloane could hear him drawing on the notes he'd shown her earlier. "We'd been walking for hours, just talking about everything and nothing. It was fall and the leaves were changing colors. Sloane loves autumn." "I do," Sloane confirmed, which was true. Small truths woven into big lies. "And I realized I didn't want to wait," Dashiell continued. "I didn't want some elaborate plan or perfect moment. I just wanted her, so I stopped on this little bridge over the lake, and I got down on one knee right there." "And what did you say?" Eleanor asked, leaning forward eagerly despite her obvious pain. Dashiell looked at Sloane, and something passed between them, a connection neither of them expected. "I said, you make me want to be the man I see reflected in your eyes. Someone kind and present and real. Marry me." The words were fiction, but they felt achingly real. Sloane found she couldn't look away from his face. "And I cried," Sloane added, finding herself pulled into the story. "I cried and said yes before he could even finish asking." Eleanor clapped her hands together weakly. "Oh, that's perfect. That's exactly what I hoped for him. Someone who sees him, really sees him, not just the business or the money." They stayed for 2 hours instead of 1. Eleanor wanted to hear everything. How they spent their weekends, lazy mornings reading the paper. Sloane apparently taught him to make decent pancakes. What movies they watched together. Classics because Sloane shared Eleanor's love of old films. Whether Dashiell had finally learned to cook, sort of with heavy supervision. Sloane found herself slipping deeper into the role with each question. She invented a first date at a small Italian restaurant where Dashiell had been so nervous he'd knocked over a water glass. She described their first trip together to a bed and breakfast upstate where they'd spent the weekend hiking and talking about their dreams. She even showed Eleanor a ring, her own grandmother's ring that she wore on her right hand, quickly shifted to her left for the performance. And Dashiell played along perfectly, adding small details that made the fiction feel real. The way he'd been nervous to meet her non-existent brother Marcus, how she'd talked him into volunteering at the hospital's free clinic, how she'd made him realize that success without meaning was just emptiness with a better bank account. "You've changed him," Eleanor said at one point, reaching out to touch Sloane's cheek. "I can see it. He smiles now when he talks. He's home for family dinners. He's present. That's all I ever wanted for him." Around 4 in the morning, Eleanor grew noticeably more tired. Her breathing became labored, and the pauses between her sentences lengthened. A nurse came in to check her vitals, giving Sloane a curious look but saying nothing. "I'm so glad you came," Eleanor whispered, her eyes starting to close. "Promise me you'll take care of each other. Promise me you'll be happy." "We promise," Sloane said, her voice thick with genuine emotion. "We'll take care of each other." "Good," Eleanor murmured. "That's good. I can rest now." In the hallway afterward, Sloane leaned against the wall and tried not to cry. She'd done difficult things before, but this felt different, more personal, more painful. "Thank you," Dashiell said quietly, standing beside her but not touching. "I know that was incredibly hard. The way you were with her, it was beautiful. You gave her exactly what she needed." "I lied to a dying woman," Sloane said, wiping her eyes roughly. "I helped create an elaborate fiction in her final hours. I'm not sure beautiful is the word I'd use." "You gave her peace," Dashiell corrected gently. "You gave her joy in her darkest moments. That's more than most people get." They stood in the hallway, the harsh fluorescent lights making everything feel surreal. Sloane realized she was still wearing the ring on her left hand, her grandmother's ring, now part of an elaborate lie. "I should get back to work," she said, pulling off the ring and moving it back to her right hand. "I'm sure you're not supposed to fraternize with fake wives during work hours." "Sloane," Dashiell started, but she was already walking away. "Don't," she said without turning around. "Please just don't. Let's just leave it as a kind thing we did for your mother." But 3 hours later, as Sloane was finishing her medication rounds, she heard the overhead page, "Code Blue, room 412. Code Blue, room 412. She ran. She knew she shouldn't. It wasn't her patient, wasn't her flaw, but she ran anyway. By the time she reached the room, it was over. Eleanor had passed peacefully in her sleep, Dashiell holding her hand. The attending physician was speaking to him in low tones about next steps, about arrangements to be made. Dashiell nodded mechanically, his face blank with shock. But when he saw Sloane in the doorway, something cracked in his expression. "She's gone," he said, and his voice broke completely. "She's gone and she died happy because of a lie." Without thinking, Sloane crossed the room and pulled him into her arms. He fell apart then, sobbing against her shoulder while she held him. This stranger she'd known for less than 6 hours, but who felt somehow familiar. The attending physician quietly left them alone. "She died believing you were loved," Sloane whispered into his hair. "She died believing you'd be okay. That's not nothing. That's everything. I don't know how to thank you," Dashiell said when he'd finally composed himself enough to speak. "You didn't have to stay. You didn't have to be so kind to her, to me. You could have just—" "Everyone deserves kindness," Sloane interrupted, "especially in grief. Can I see you again?" The words tumbled out of him. "Not for pretend, for real. I'd like to take you to dinner, get to know the real Sloane, not the fictional wife I created." Sloane wanted to say yes, but the whole situation felt too raw, too strange. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said as gently as she could. "We met under complicated circumstances. Maybe it's better to just remember this as a kind thing we did for your mother." Disappointment flickered across Dashiell's face, but he nodded. "I understand. But if you ever change your mind—" He pulled out a business card, pressing it into her hand. "I meant what I said in there. The version of me that existed tonight? With you, that's who I want to be." 3 weeks later, Sloane was leaving the hospital after another brutal double shift. The autumn air was crisp, and she pulled her cardigan tighter against the chill. She was so tired she could barely see straight, thinking only of her bed and maybe a hot shower first. Sloane. She turned to find Dashiell leaning against the wall near the exit. He looked different than he had that night. Less polished, more human. He wore jeans and a simple sweater, and his hair was slightly messy, but his eyes were the same, intense, searching. "Dashiell," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I've been coming every day," he admitted, straightening up, "hoping to run into you. I asked at the front desk when you worked, but they wouldn't tell me for privacy reasons, which I respect. So I've just been waiting, hoping." "For 3 weeks?" Sloane asked, incredulous. "For 3 weeks," he confirmed, "because I couldn't stop thinking about what my mother said, about finding something real, about not dying alone in a hospital room with no one who knows you." "Dashiell, I'm not asking you to be my wife," he interrupted quickly, "or even my girlfriend. I'm asking for one coffee. Let me prove that the man you met that night wasn't just a performance, that I can be more than a CEO in a suit, that I want to know you, the real you. Please." Sloane studied him in the dim parking lot light. She should say no. Their entire relationship, if you could even call it that, had been built on a lie. They'd played pretend for a dying woman, and now it was over. But she remembered the way he'd held his mother's hand, the way he'd looked at her in that hospital room like she was the only real thing in his world, the way he'd sobbed in her arms when Eleanor died, raw and vulnerable and completely unguarded. "One coffee," she said finally, "but you're buying." That coffee became dinner. Dinner became a movie. Movies became long walks through the city where they talked about everything. His relationship with his mother, her promise to her dying mom, the weight of expectations and dreams deferred. "I'm stepping back from the company," Dashiell told her one evening as they sat in Central Park, the same park where his fictional proposal had supposedly happened. "Hiring a COO to handle day-to-day operations. I realized my mother was right. I don't want to die alone in a boardroom. I want to actually live." "That's a huge change," Sloane said, watching the sun set over the skyline. "You inspired it," Dashiell admitted. "Watching you with my mother, the way you cared for a complete stranger, the way you create these moments of grace in the middle of chaos. I realized I've been living for things that don't matter, profit margins and market share and quarterly earnings. I want to matter the way you matter. I want to help people, not just make money." "I'm just a nurse," Sloane protested. "I'm not special." "You're extraordinary," Dashiell corrected, turning to face her fully. "And I need to tell you something. I'm falling in love with you. The real you, not the pretend wife I invented, but the woman who eats terrible cafeteria sandwiches at 2 a.m. and works double shifts to put her brother through school and still finds the energy to be kind to strangers." Sloane's heart raced. "This is crazy. We barely know each other. Our entire relationship started with a lie." "We met in the strangest way possible," Dashiell agreed. "We pretended to be married before we even had a real conversation. But maybe that's perfect, because I already know what it feels like to have you beside me in the worst moment of my life. I already know you're the person I want when everything falls apart. I don't want to pretend anymore, Sloane. I want real. With you." She kissed him then, there in Central Park, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. And it felt like the most honest thing either of them had ever done. 6 months later, Dashiell proposed for real, not in Central Park, but in the hospital cafeteria where they'd met. He got down on one knee at 2 in the morning in that terrible fluorescent lighting, while exhausted nurses and doctors looked on in surprise. "I know this isn't romantic," he said, opening a small velvet box. "But this is where it started, where you agreed to help a desperate stranger and accidentally changed his entire life. This is where I learned what it means to be seen. So I'm asking here, in the place where everything began, Sloane Mercer, will you marry me for real this time?" Through tears, Sloane said yes. At their wedding 8 months later, Dashiell's best man told an edited version of their story, leaving out the deception, focusing on the unexpected romance. They met in a hospital, he said, and found love in the darkest hour. In her vows, Sloane said, "You asked me to pretend for one night. I'm promising you real for every night after. You taught me that sometimes the messiest beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings." In his vows, Dashiell said, "You gave my mother peace in her final hours. But more than that, you gave me a reason to become the man she always believed I could be. The man I see reflected in your eyes. Thank you for making that fiction real." And in the front row, if you'd looked closely, you might have seen an empty chair with a white rose and a photograph of Eleanor Grayson, a woman who'd never know her desperate lie had somehow become the truest thing in her son's life. Real love, built on a foundation of pretend, proven through the hardest moments, and lasting forever because they'd chosen every single day to make the fiction real. And that's where our story ends today. What did you think? Did Sloane and Dashiell's unexpected journey touch your heart? Let us know in the comments what your favorite moment was. If you enjoyed this story, we have so many more waiting for you. Check out our playlist for more heartwarming romance tales that will make you believe in love all over again. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and give us a thumbs up. Your support means everything to us. Until next time, keep believing in love, keep believing in second chances, and remember, the best stories are the ones that remind us we all deserve our happily ever after. See you in the next story.